The cement mixer's rear axle snapped through the center stone at exactly 8:47 a.m. 15 tons of wet concrete poured into Willow Creek. A century of my family's history, my grandfather's hand-laid 1923 bridge, shattered in 11 seconds. Marjorie Whitman stood there in her crisp white blazer, laughing. Oops. Those old rocks weren't built for real trucks, honey. She thought it was just an accident. A funny inconvenience. What she didn't know was that I'd been documenting every crack, every violation, every overweight delivery truck for 4 months. That bridge wasn't just legacy. It was the only legal access road to her entire gated community. And when her own cement truck finally broke it, she handed me everything I needed. I didn't just lose something that morning. I won. Before we jump into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you've ever had a crazy HOA moment, hit subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. I bought the property 3 years ago. 4 acres along Willow Creek, tucked into the southeast corner of what used to be open farmland. The house had been in my family since 1891. My grandfather built the stone bridge by hand in 1923. Limestone blocks hauled from a quarry 16 miles north. No mortar. Just precision. It still carried traffic every single day. The bridge connected my land to County Road 12. But it also happened to cross onto what became, in 2019, the entrance corridor to Stonegate Meadows, a private gated community. 200 homes. Manicured lawns. An HOA with an operating budget bigger than some small towns. I wasn't part of the HOA. My property predated their development by a century. But my bridge was grandfathered into their access easement. Legal. Recorded. Permanent. At first, that didn't seem to matter. The HOA left me alone. I left them alone. I worked my shifts. Came home. Fixed the fence line. Kept to myself. Then Marjorie Whitman became president. She knocked on my door on a Tuesday evening in late March. Crisp white blazer. Clipboard. Smile that didn't reach her eyes. Just wanted to introduce myself, she said. I'm sure we'll work together beautifully. I nodded. Shook her hand. Closed the door. 2 days later, I got my first letter. It was titled, Notice of Community Standards Compliance Review. It referenced my shared access responsibilities and reminded me that while my property was not under HOA jurisdiction, the bridge corridor fell within mutual interest zones, subject to collaborative oversight. I read it twice. It didn't actually say I had to do anything. It just sounded official. I filed it away. 3 weeks later, another letter. This one mentioned structural concerns about the bridge. No specifics. No engineers cited. Just a line that said the HOA board was exploring options to ensure long-term safety and access reliability. I called the county. They had no complaints on file. No inspection requests. No safety violations. I called Marjorie. Oh, it's just precautionary, she said. We've had some delivery trucks report rough crossings. You understand, we just want everyone to feel secure. I asked if she had documentation. She said she'd get back to me. She never did. But the letters kept coming. One mentioned visual disruption to community aesthetics. Another suggested I consider voluntary participation in a joint infrastructure fund. A third arrived with a list of recommended contractors for a bridge assessment I hadn't requested. I didn't respond to any of them. That's when the truck started. At first, it was just more traffic than usual. Delivery vans. Landscaping trucks. Nothing alarming. Then the cement mixers started coming through. Stonegate was expanding, adding a new cul-de-sac on the north end. 30 more homes. Months of construction. And every heavy truck they hired used my bridge. I stood at my kitchen window one morning and watched a fully loaded gravel truck cross the bridge at 40 miles an hour. The stones groaned. I could hear it from inside the house. I walked out to inspect it that afternoon. There were fresh stress cracks along the eastern edge. Small but new. I took photos. Noted the date. Filed them. A week later, I put up a small sign at the bridge entrance. Weight limit, 8 tons. Private easement. Unauthorized heavy vehicles prohibited. Marjorie called me that same night. You can't restrict access. she said. That's a shared easement. You don't own the right to block commerce. I told her I wasn't blocking anything. I was enforcing a weight limit that had existed since the bridge was built. There's no record of that, she said. I told her I'd be happy to provide documentation. She hung up. The next morning, my sign was gone. I put up another one. Same thing. Gone by noon. I installed a trail camera. The footage showed a man in an HOA polo shirt pulling the sign out of the ground and throwing it into the back of a pickup truck. Marjorie was in the passenger seat. I saved the video. Didn't confront anyone. Just watched. The cement trucks kept coming. The cracks kept spreading. I started logging every overweight vehicle. The license plate. Estimated load. I kept a notebook in my truck. I took photos. I contacted the county about weight limits on private easements. I researched load-bearing limits for dry stack limestone construction. I requested engineering reports from 1923. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I just documented everything. And then, one morning in early June, I got a letter that wasn't from the HOA. It was from a law firm in the state capital. It said I was being sued for unlawful interference with easement access and economic harm to community development. The demand was simple. Remove all restrictions. Allow full access. Or face litigation and financial penalties. I read it once. Put it on the kitchen table. Stared at it for a long time. That should have been the moment I backed down. But it wasn't. I didn't hire a lawyer right away. I made copies of everything instead. The easement agreement from 1974. The county records showing my grandfather's bridge construction. The weight limit documentation I'd found in the local historical society archives. I built a file 3 inches thick. Then I responded to the lawsuit myself. 1 page. Polite. Factual. I attached 12 exhibits. Marjorie's attorney didn't reply for 3 weeks. When he did, the tone had changed. The demand was smaller. They were willing to discuss terms. I thought that meant I'd won. I was wrong. 2 days later, the HOA called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, but I heard about it from a neighbor who lived on the edge of Stonegate. She texted me a photo of the agenda. Item 4. Infrastructure safety and liability concerns regarding non-member access points. They were planning something. I showed up anyway. Marjorie tried to have me removed. Said the meeting was for residents only. I reminded her it was a public notice meeting under state law. She went quiet. Let me stay. I sat in the back and listened. She stood at the front of the room with a projector screen behind her. On it was a photo of my bridge. Zoomed in on one of the cracks. This structure, she said, poses a safety risk to our entire community. We have documented evidence of structural failure. We have liability exposure every single day this bridge remains in use. She clicked to the next slide. It was an estimate from a construction company. $460,000 to replace the bridge with a modern concrete span. We believe, she said, that the cost should be shared equally between the HOA and the property owner who has failed to maintain safe access. I felt my chest tighten. She was claiming I was responsible for half the cost of replacing a bridge her own trucks had damaged. I didn't say anything. I just took notes. The board voted unanimously to pursue all available legal remedies. I walked out before the meeting ended. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went through my documentation again. I had proof the bridge had been sound before the construction traffic started. I had photos, dates, logs. But I also knew how this worked. Marjorie had money. She had a legal team. She had a board that voted however she wanted. I had a file folder and a bridge that was falling apart. The next morning, I installed weight sensors on the bridge. Small digital devices that recorded every vehicle crossing and its estimated load. I mounted them under the stone ledges where no one would see them. I didn't tell anyone. For 2 weeks, I collected data. Cement truck, 32,000 pounds. Dump truck, 41,000 pounds. Delivery truck, 28,000 pounds. Every single one over the legal weight limit for a private easement structure. I saved everything to a cloud drive. Then Marjorie made her next move. I came home from work one afternoon and found a construction crew on my property. They were surveying the bridge, measuring, taking photos. One of them had a drill and was pulling core samples from the stone. I asked who authorized them to be there. The foreman handed me a piece of paper. It was a court order. Temporary inspection access granted to the HOA pending litigation. I read it twice. It was legitimate. I stepped back and let them work. They were there for 6 hours. When they left, there were new holes in the bridge. But permanent. 2 weeks later, their report was filed with the court. I got a copy through a public records request. It said the bridge was structurally compromised and unsafe for vehicle traffic exceeding 5,000 pounds. It recommended immediate closure. It didn't mention the overweight trucks. It didn't mention the construction traffic. It didn't mention anything I documented. It just said the bridge was old and dangerous. Marjorie submitted a motion to have the bridge closed by county order. I had 5 days to respond. I wrote a 12-page opposition. I attached my logs, my photos, my weight sensor data. I included the video of the HOA worker removing my signs. I cited state transportation law, easement law, and historical preservation statutes. I filed it myself. No attorney. The hearing was scheduled for June 14th. I didn't know if it would be enough. But then something else happened. 3 days before the hearing, I was sitting in my office at the station when one of my deputies knocked on the door. "Chief," he said, "you need to see this." He handed me a traffic citation. It had been issued that morning on County Road 12. The vehicle cited a cement mixer, registered to a contractor working for Stonegate Meadows HOA. The violation, exceeding posted weight limits on a restricted access road. I looked at the deputy. "There's no weight limit on County Road 12, I said. "There is now," he said. "As of last week." County engineer updated the signage after a complaint was filed about structural damage to a historic bridge. I stared at him. "Who filed the complaint?" I asked. He checked his notes. "Anonymous." But it was flagged for immediate action because it involved public safety and a heritage site. I didn't file that complaint. But someone did. And now, every truck Marjorie sent across that bridge was violating a county ordinance. I kept my face neutral. Thanked the deputy. Closed the door. Then I pulled up the county traffic database. There had been 9 citations issued in the past 6 days. All cement trucks. All registered to Stonegate contractors. Each citation carried a fine. Each one created a public record. And each one proved that the HOA had knowingly sent overweight vehicles across a restricted bridge. I printed every citation. Added them to my file. The hearing was in 2 days. I went home that night and stood on the bridge. The cracks were worse now. The core sample holes were small dark pockets in the stone. The sensors were still recording. I thought about my grandfather. About the work he'd put into this. About the years it had stood. And I thought about Marjorie, standing in her white blazer, laughing. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt calm. Because I realized something. She thought this was about the bridge. But it wasn't. It was about what happened when you destroyed the only legal access road to your own community. And she was about to find out. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. Beige walls. Fluorescent lights. A folding table at the front where the county magistrate sat with a stack of files. Marjorie arrived with 3 people. Her attorney, an engineer, and someone I didn't recognize in a suit. I arrived alone. The magistrate called the case. Marjorie's attorney stood first. He was polished, confident. He laid out the HOA's position in clean, practiced language. The bridge was deteriorating. It posed a public safety risk. The property owner had refused to maintain it. The HOA was simply trying to protect its residents and preserve access. He submitted the engineering report. He submitted photos of the cracks. He submitted a timeline of complaints. Then he said something I hadn't expected. "Your Honor, we're also filing a cross-complaint. The property owner has engaged in retaliatory conduct. He installed unauthorized surveillance equipment. He's issued harassing communications to HOA contractors. And he's attempted to restrict lawful access in violation of recorded easement rights." He slid a folder across the table. I felt my jaw tighten. The magistrate looked at me. Do you have representation? No, Your Honor, I said. I'm representing myself. He nodded. You may respond. I stood, opened my folder, pulled out the first document. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that directly contradicts the HOA's claims. I handed him my weight sensor data. Printed, dated, annotated. This shows every vehicle that crossed the bridge over a 6-week period. Cement trucks, dump trucks, gravel haulers, all exceeding the posted weight limit, all registered to contractors hired by the Stonegate Meadows HOA. The magistrate looked at the pages, flipped through them slowly. Marjorie's attorney shifted in his chair. I pulled out the next document. This is documentation from the county engineer's office. A formal complaint was filed regarding structural damage to a historic bridge. As a result, County Road 12 was reclassified with updated weight restrictions. Those restrictions went into effect on June 3rd. I handed him the traffic citations. These are 9 separate violations issued to HOA contractors in the 6 days following that reclassification. Every one of them was driving a vehicle over the legal weight limit. Every one of them was hired by the HOA. Every one of them contributed to the damage they're now claiming I failed to prevent. The magistrate set the citations down, looked at Marjorie's attorney. Counselor? The attorney glanced at Marjorie. She was staring at the table. Your Honor, he said slowly, we were not aware of the updated county restrictions. That's not a defense, the magistrate said. I wasn't finished. I pulled out the video file. Printed stills. Timestamp visible. This is footage from a trail camera on my property. It shows an HOA employee removing legally posted signage from the bridge entrance. The passenger in the vehicle is HOA President Marjorie Whitman. I slid the images across the table. The magistrate studied them. His expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. He looked at Marjorie. Ms. Whitman, did you authorize the removal of private property signage? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at her attorney. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, we'd need to review the context. It's a yes or no question, the magistrate said. Marjorie's face went pale. We felt the signs were misleading, she said quietly. Misleading, the magistrate repeated. He leaned back in his chair, stared at the ceiling for a moment. Then he looked at me. Anything else? I pulled out the last document. Yes, Your Honor. This is the original easement agreement from 1974. It grants the HOA access across the bridge, but it also includes a clause. Section 4, paragraph B. It states that the easement holder is responsible for proportional maintenance costs if damage results from use exceeding the structure's original design specifications. I let that sit for a moment. The bridge was built in 1923 for horse-drawn wagons and light vehicles. Maximum load capacity, 8 tons. The HOA has been sending vehicles weighing up to 20 tons across it for 6 months. Under the terms of their own easement, they're liable for the damage. The magistrate read the clause. Read it again. Marjorie's attorney stood. Your Honor, that clause is outdated. It doesn't account for modern transportation standards. It's in the recorded easement, the magistrate said. It's enforceable. He closed the file. Here's my ruling. The bridge will remain open under current county weight restrictions. The HOA's motion for closure is denied. The cross-complaint for retaliatory conduct is dismissed. And I'm referring this matter to the county attorney's office for review of potential easement violations and vandalism. He looked at Marjorie. If your contractors continue to violate county weight limits, the HOA will be held financially responsible for any further structural damage. Are we clear? She nodded. Didn't say a word. The magistrate stood. We're adjourned. I gathered my papers. Walked out of the room. Marjorie didn't look at me. I got in my truck. Sat there for a long time. I'd won. But I knew this wasn't over. Because Marjorie still didn't understand what she'd actually done. She thought she lost a hearing. What she really lost was something much bigger. And she was about to find out. 3 days later, the county engineer sent a formal notice to the Stonegate Meadows HOA. The bridge was being inspected for long-term structural integrity. Pending the results, all commercial vehicle access was suspended indefinitely. Stonegate had 30 homes under construction, and no legal way to deliver materials. That's when Marjorie finally realized. She hadn't just damaged my bridge. She'd destroyed her own access. The construction at Stonegate stopped the next day. Not because anyone wanted it to, because there was no legal way to bring materials in. The bridge was the only access point that connected the development to County Road 12. The county engineer's suspension meant no cement trucks, no lumber deliveries, no gravel haulers, nothing over 5,000 pounds. Marjorie tried to find another route. There wasn't one. The development was bordered on 3 sides by wetlands and protected conservation easements. The only other road was a private fire lane that couldn't legally be used for commercial traffic. She called the county. They told her the suspension would remain in place until a full structural assessment was completed. That assessment would take 8 to 12 weeks. She called her contractors. They pulled off the job sites. 30 homes sat unfinished. Foundations poured. Frames half-built. Tarps flapping in the wind. The HOA tried to negotiate with me directly. Marjorie didn't come herself. She sent the vice president, a man named Gordon who looked uncomfortable the entire conversation. He asked if I'd be willing to allow limited access while the county completed their review. I asked if the HOA would accept financial responsibility for all repairs to the bridge, past and future. He said he'd have to check with the board. I never heard from him again. 2 weeks later, Marjorie resigned as HOA president. The official statement said she was stepping down to pursue other opportunities. But I heard from neighbors that the board had forced her out. Homeowners were furious. Property values were dropping. People who'd bought homes in the development couldn't move in. Buyers were backing out of contracts. The lawsuit started a month later. Not against me. Against the HOA. Homeowners who'd signed contracts for new construction filed claims for breach of contract and failure to deliver promised infrastructure. Buyers who'd backed out sued for misrepresentation. One contractor filed a lien against the HOA for unpaid work. The HOA's insurance didn't cover most of it. By August, Stonegate Meadows was bleeding money. The county completed their structural assessment in late September. The results were exactly what I expected. The bridge had sustained significant damage from repeated overweight vehicle crossings. But it was reparable. The engineer estimated a cost of $72,000 to reinforce the foundation, replace damaged stones, and restore it to full weight capacity. The county issued their final determination. The bridge could reopen for normal traffic. But any future damage caused by easement holders would be their financial responsibility under the terms of the original 1974 agreement. The HOA had a choice: pay for the repairs, or lose access permanently. They paid. It took them 6 weeks to come up with the money. They had to issue a special assessment to every homeowner in the development. $400 per household. People were livid. Some refused to pay. The HOA threatened liens. More lawsuits followed. I didn't pay a cent. The repairs were completed in early November. The contractor they hired did clean work. Reinforced the foundation, restored the stones, even cleaned the moss off the sides. When it was finished, it looked almost exactly the way it had in 1923. I stood on it the morning after the work was done. The sun was just coming up. The creek was quiet. The stone was solid under my feet. It felt the same. But everything around it had changed. Marjorie moved out of Stonegate in December. I heard she sold her house at a loss. I don't know where she went. The new HOA president was a retired civil engineer named Bill. He knocked on my door a week after taking over. I just wanted to introduce myself, he said, and apologize for all of it. I nodded. Didn't say much. We're implementing new policies, he said. Weight limits. Contractor vetting. Regular inspections. We're not going to let this happen again. I appreciated that. Told him so. He shook my hand and left. I haven't had a problem with the HOA since. The bridge is still standing. It still carries traffic every day. And every time I cross it, I think about what happened. Not because I'm angry. I'm not. but because it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Power doesn't come from titles or bylaws or boards. It comes from knowing the rules better than the people trying to use them against you. Marjorie thought she had control because she had a lawyer and a gavel and a community behind her. But she didn't read the easement. She didn't check the county ordinances. She didn't think about what would happen if the bridge she was destroying was the only thing keeping her community functional. She assumed I'd back down. And when I didn't, she had nothing left. I didn't set out to ruin her. I didn't set out to hurt anyone. I just documented everything, followed the process, and let her own decisions do the rest. That's the part people don't always understand. Revenge isn't about getting even. It's about being prepared. It's about watching someone dig their own hole and knowing exactly when to step back and let them fall in. Marjorie destroyed a piece of my family's history because she thought it didn't matter. And in doing that, she destroyed the only thing that mattered to hers. I still drive across that bridge every morning. I still see the stones my grandfather laid by hand. I still feel the weight of what it took to build something that lasts 100 years. And I know now that some things are worth protecting. Not because they're old, but because they remind us that power is temporary. And consequences are permanent. So if someone ever tells you that a 100-year-old bridge is just a pile of old rocks, ask them this. What happens when those rocks are the only things standing between them and everything they've built? Because sooner or later, they'll find out. And by then it's already too late.